Hey guys, Ian Michael here of Canuck Cinematics. Today we'll be looking at and discussing about the two types of firearms that I think you'll see on films, TV shows, music videos, and any other sort of media that you'll find out there. Now, in front of me, you'll see I have four selections within my collection that I think best represent what I am talking about and discussing about in this video. Now, I'll ask you one question before we go any further. Of these four, what do you think is the one that are firing replicas, and which of these are the non-firing replicas? I'll give you some moments to think on that, but what I do want to look at is the discussion within what each of those are used for, the functionality of both types, and also looking at the other types that you might find within the filming industry that may not exactly describe non-firing and firing replicas to the exact T, but I think are important to talk about since they are still used predominantly within film. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the first of the two types that we'd be discussing about is what I would call non-firing replica firearms. Now, what these are is that they are firearms that look and function like the real thing, but under no circumstances do they have the capability of actually firing a projectile or discharging any sort of cartridge. So, for example, of these four that I have, the most basic example I can show you is this is a replica coach gun, double barrel, and it's the outside hammer. Now, even though it looks like the real thing, you can close it. It has the functionality of you being able to cock the hammers and fire them and opening the breech to load new rounds into it. Under no circumstances can you actually load a shell into this, pull the trigger, and anything will actually happen. And it'll be the same thing with this Winchester here. This is a Denis replica firearm, and like the aforementioned coach gun, this Winchester can actually action. Like the actual thing, you can pull the trigger, and you'll hear the click and everything else, but you are unable to load anything from the slide here. It is fused shut, and if I open this up, you can see there's nothing in there to allow to feed a bullet or a cartridge into it. So you might be asking yourself, what are the uses for these types? So what I've seen in most films that I watched and such, there are a couple of reasons why you would want to use a non-firing replica compared to something that could potentially fire a projectile or a cartridge. First reason is that a non-firing replica would be best suited for something that would be for a display on a film set. For example, the Winchester here could be mounted on a wall. An example I can think of is from Shaun of the Dead at the Winchester pub, where there is a Winchester rifle on the top of the pub. Now, they do later on use it in the pub, in the finale scene, but I do digress and believe that they would have multiple copies of the same gun throughout the studio. And for the sake of convenience and to make sure things are safe on set, they would use a non-firing replica for the scenes when it's just hanging up on the bar. And then when they actually bring it down for it to be used, they have a separate one that is the firing replica firearm. The second and third thing that a non-firing replica could also be used for is for either one, the pistol or gun is holstered or slung on your back, meaning that even though right now the one that I have is a firing replica, it actually discharges something, it can instead be replaced by something that is inert and has no firing capabilities, or could very well be a rubber gun, kind of like a training gun that you see in police academies or any other self-defense course when it comes to like gun training, or just for the sake of having a prop far off in the distance. The same goes with simply carrying the gun. And the one clip I can show with this would be from Saving Private Ryan, when the group of them are walking through France looking for Ryan, when I believe it's Upham looking or talking to the rest of the people. They are all carrying their rifles, whether it's by hand or slung in their back. And those ones could be examples of them not having to have a working firing replica firearm. This for safety precautions. Now, I will say this also depends on the level of the production. That being a Steven Spielberg production, more than likely those ones were just not loaded with anything. But when it gets to smaller budgets and smaller constraints when it comes to safety concerns and budgetary reasons, you can't get away with just getting a replica rifle or a pistol or a rubber pistol if it is holstered on your back, slung, or any other manner of it being held. And as I showed before with the coach gun, how you can operate it and open it like the real thing, cock the hammer, and so on. One of the things with some of the non-firing replicas is that you can actually use dummy rounds, shells, or bullets to load it like the real thing. You would just not be able to operate it like the actual thing. So unless it was like an actual BB, airsoft, or paintball gun, you can put what I would suggest inert shotgun shells or something that is made by the props department that looks like the real thing. So you can actually, for a scene, if you needed somebody to load a shotgun, but they're not going to be firing it for the duration of the scene or the movie or the TV show, that they put it in, they cock it, or lock it, then cock it, but you never see them firing it. So all in all, when it comes to these non-firing replicas, they have many uses that could be used within the films, and because of their inability to fire anything, it's like I've said before, they could be used for decorative purposes, for scenery, for prop scenery, if you have a gun wall, but you're not using anything on the gun wall, or if the character is simply holding it, holstering it, or even if it does show them loading something into it, that can still be an example of a non-firing replica because it has no capabilities of firing that said cartridge. And I will say, as I previously stated with the rubber guns, that is another type of a non-firing replica when it comes to both a rubber pistol and then when it comes to rifles here, that you will have in some cases in movies and in TV shows, and you'll see this in examples that I pulled up with some Revolutionary or Napoleonic era TV shows and movies, and some more modern examples as well. And I can even speak from personal experience itself that when it comes to filming scenes with people who have many rifles, some of these non-firing replicas will just straight up be carved wood rifles, meaning from afar they'll look nice, but if you ever brought it close to camera, and I'll see if I find an example on the internet and it'll pop up here, that they look like the real thing. It's nice and carved out in wood or in plastic or in resin, but the only difference with this one is that it will not be able to action anything, like whether it's the lever of a Winchester, the bolt of a bolt-action rifle, or the hammer of a pistol. So I would use these, like I was saying in my personal experience, that they'd be used for faraway shots, for like if you're not going to be seeing any specific details to the soldiers themselves, and it's just slung on the back, or they're just holding it and just marching forward, more than likely you can get away with just a carved wooden rifle. Unless you get to the scenes that they actually have to fire something, like whether it's the blanks and so on and so forth, that's when you use the firing replicas, which conveniently we'll be talking about that next.